Welcome back to Irish Illustrated Insider, our final special edition of the College Football Playoff Ranking Show. I'm Tim O'Malley, joined by Tim Priester and Drew Mentok of Irish Illustrated, John Bryce of Football Scoop. Notre Dame ranked number 4. Obviously, they cannot play in that spot. Projections, Notre Dame hosting Alabama, December 20th or 21st. Congratulations for all your hard work, all your efforts, 10 in a row. Here come the Crimson Tide. What do you think about that, Tim Priester?
Well, it could change this weekend if SMU wins, which we could probably maybe anticipate a little bit will happen. That could shift that. But look, it is what it is, and I know that the guys in the broadcast last night were talking about the winner of Tennessee Ohio State plays Oregon. I mean in the second game. So.
Oregon plays the winner of Tennessee Ohio State's one way of looking at it too.
Yeah,
That's not
well,
nice. Yeah.
right, exactly. So I mean, this is the world that we live in now. Maybe there are some, not exactly how you would adjust that. The other day I said, would they want those kind of matchups? Would that be fair? And fair is kind of out the window when it comes to
Television.
well, television in a 12-team bracket. It's just you can't serve all masters here. It's like the complaints about strength of schedule and head to head. You can't serve everybody. The committee has to make a decision one way or another, which they did in this instance with Alabama and its SEC brethren. But yeah, that'd be difficult. I'm sure Alabama will look at this and say, "Holy crap, we got to go to Notre Dame on the third weekend of December." That probably isn't real attractive to them as well. And keep in mind, this is not Nick Saban's Alabama team. It's Kalen DeBoer's, and it's a different set of circumstances.
John Bryce, other than the fairness of the situation, what was your initial take and the fact that I guess even if Notre Dame is, let's say Notre Dame doesn't have to face Alabama, that Alabama got in over Miami, Alabama is set, and all of a sudden there's no such thing as any reason to move anything because there's no more data points. I do think goalposts tend to shift for this television show.
Boy, that to me was the most painful, was just having to listen to Ward Manuel last night. I didn't think he made any sense, which is why I tweeted he didn't make any sense. I will say this very quickly. As it stands right now, after talking with a bunch of people the last 24 hours, if that Notre Dame Alabama matchup holds, my understanding is that game would be Saturday night instead of Friday night because of the magnitude of the TV draw. So if it's Notre Dame Alabama, then get ready for that to be the Saturday night primetime game. If Notre Dame gets the 5 spot, if it's Notre Dame versus Arizona State, that game is expected to be Friday night. So
I thought you were going to say the Tuesday lunch crowd was going to get the Arizona State game, but Notre Dame is a big draw, so that's good.
Yes, Notre Dame is a big draw, period. If it's Notre Dame and meh, then that's the Friday night game. If it's Notre Dame and Alabama, it is the Saturday night game. I don't understand the whole no more data points. These teams aren't going to move. If Texas goes in, and I don't for a moment believe this would happen, but if Texas goes in and wins 41-3, you're telling me that Georgia doesn't move at all, that Georgia still gets to host a game. I understand protecting a team being in the conference championship game and not having that team lose, but if you lose 41-3, you still get to host Indiana. You wouldn't have to at least go to Indiana. Not that it would matter. I'd still pick Georgia to smoke them. So that's my takeaway. That's my contention with it. Like,
if I get the data points, well, there are no data points when a team is on a bye during the last month of the season, but they move then. Why wouldn't they move now? Yeah, I think Ward Manuel he's in a tough spot. I mean, he looked like he was.
I don't know. I don't think he's in a tough spot. I think he's just being. No, he's transparent that this is a television show. This is They want ratings. They want Notre Dame to play Alabama. They want Tennessee to play Ohio State.
Okay, he was put in a tough spot by Reese Davis because Reese Davis called him out.
Good for him.
That's what.
Good for Reese Davis.
Yeah, and you could tell that he was kind of reeling a little bit, but I didn't understand the data point comment because there have been weeks where other teams haven't played, and now you stop doing that. But again, you can't serve all masters here, and there's just, whether it's 12 teams, 18, 16 teams, there's always going to be an argument about the shifting here. It's a tough spot to be in. I'm just trying to be objective about that, but yeah, that didn't make a whole lot of sense based upon what's been happening in recent weeks. Why would that change right now?
before we
and
talk about
moreover,
tweaks, I was going to get to Drew real
Yeah,
fast.
let's
JB,
get
if you have
Drew
a
in here.
second, Drew brought up because of just this is the first time, or if we look at projections, we can consider them possibly staying as opposed to 3 weeks ago when we started the show. Drew dug up some projections for point spreads for these first round games.
Yeah, so I looked at Colin Wilson. We discussed him a few weeks ago. He works for the Action Network, a sports gambling specific website, and he kind of threw out his projections for first round games. I think when we discussed this a few weeks ago, Notre Dame versus Alabama was a pick 'em. Now he views Notre Dame as a 3-point favorite, so that's an interesting development. Um, but it's also interesting to note when we discuss could Notre Dame get up to the 5 spot is Penn State is a 13.5-point favorite over Arizona State. And since most of us view Notre Dame as better than Penn State, you could see Notre Dame being a legit 2-touchdown favorite. And I think that really underscores the importance of Notre Dame possibly getting up to that game, not only in terms of their viability of winning a first round matchup, but also I think it's worth pointing out just the physicality that Notre Dame plays with. And if they have a team that can't really match that, that takes a lot less wear and tear in that game. And if you're looking at winning 4 more games to win a national championship, I think having an easier first round matchup like that is really important because you don't want to deal with those potential injuries or just even, I think we've kind of discussed like the hangover effect of playing that type of physical football too. So I think we see that a lot in how important it might be for Notre Dame to potentially move up a spot if they can this weekend.
JB, I cut you off. You had a rebuttal for
well, no, I was just going to add one more data point to say, like,
you can't add data points. It's over. It's over.
yeah,
Data
no.
points.
To underscore what we talked about yesterday, it's important that that Penn State not win. If you're Notre Dame and you covet that 5 spot, then you need Penn State not to win. And in that scenario, for all of Ward Manuel's bluster, I don't see how you wouldn't have an additional data point that should already reflect Notre Dame has been a better team than Penn State as it stands. So again, I'm completely fine protecting these conference championship participants that you believe have already earned the right to be in there, specifically Georgia and Penn State. You're not hearing that argument really out of the ACC. But if Penn State gets smoked by Oregon, and I already tweeted out the data points last night that Notre Dame has much superior aggregate victories against USC and Purdue than does Penn State, and those are the only 2 common opponents that they share. Then if Penn State adds an additional loss more than Notre Dame, I just don't see how you don't move the Irish at minimum, flip-flop those 2. And again, also I think there's a scenario where if Oregon handles Penn State comfortably, and then Georgia beats Texas, but it's a close game, then I still think you might see Notre Dame slide to the 5, Texas to the 6, and Penn State to the 7.
There is I think Reese, I'm not sure if it was Reese Davis. Actually, I got confused on who was talking, but I liked Reese Davis last night. He did a good job. Someone I respect noted, why don't they just seed the field at this point as opposed to the conference championship point? And I want to bring up, that is not a bad idea because when this 12-team playoff was created, the plan to expand, and Jack Swarbrick got Notre Dame a seat at the table, can't be top 4 because of conference champions. If you think of it this way, if the Big 12 existed properly and Texas was being seeded against an SEC, as a top 4 team, and the Pac-12 existed properly and Oregon was being seeded as a conference champion, I don't think we'd be looking at saying, well, gosh, getting the conference champion of Arizona State's the biggest break in the world. You would have top 4 champions from the Big 10, which would be Penn State or Ohio State, the Pac-12, which would probably be Oregon, the Big 12, as originally planned, which back in the day would have been Texas, and the SEC, which would be the winner of the Georgia, and I don't know who would be playing Georgia if this expansion ever happens. So when they made the plan, 4 conference champions made total sense to protect them. I don't think it makes sense protecting them anymore. Everybody's looking at the ACC. Now, Priester, I agree with you, SMU's underrated, but everybody's looking at the ACC and Big 12 and say, why are we protecting these conference champions right now?
Well, I think that's a really good point. I hadn't considered that. Boise has been living the charm life here, sitting at that number 4 spot through the last, several weeks anyway. I think that's a good point. Of course, there'd still be just many arguments about the reseeding process.
Yes. Yeah.
But no, I think was that your concept? I think that's a great
that's my concept. Is it was a great idea back in the day. I mean, you had to protect those teams, but now you don't.
but you're still protecting, quote, protecting the conference champion by assuring that they have a spot in the 12-team playoff.
Right.
It's a good idea. Can we hurry up and change the rules to it?
Well,
I don't know. Let's let this play out. Look, this has been a whole bunch of fun. I mean, this has worked out extremely well. You're always going to have arguments about seedings and pairings and locations, et cetera. But man, this has really, really added to the college football, the process of following college football. It's been fun.
I agree. I think for as much as like the chaos and maybe, if we could debate what's ultimately the most fair, you're right, there's a lot of issues, but I think just in terms of following it every week, like getting anticipated for the rankings and being able to have discussions like this is probably the most fun I've had with, following these rankings by a long shot. So I think I think goes back to, I think what O'Malley said earlier, like this is good for TV ratings, even if it's not really good for college football fairness. So.
Um, To your contention about the system, we don't really have to live with this one for too very long, is
No,
my
right.
understanding. It'll be expanding to at least 14 teams, I believe, in 26,
Yeah.
if not all the way to 16 teams. So there will be a different iteration of this. And look, I think all in all, overall, it's working pretty well this year. I don't have a lot of contention with the field and where it stands right now. Again, I just think that Ward Manual didn't make any sense last night, and there are still data points. And I didn't even think about it last night because I was so befuddled by how befuddled Ward Manual was that TP makes the best point of all. These teams have moved over the past few weeks when they've had weekends off. They have had bye weeks and been able to ascend the rankings. So they didn't gain data points then, but somehow they magically climbed that ladder. So
I
anyway, that's where it is with me.
I kind of got the feeling that him making that point was like a spur of the moment
Yeah.
comment,
Like he didn't think, and
like
other people were like, "Oh."
the committee members over there cringing when he said, like, it didn't seem like he went into it with a premeditated notion that he would make that reference.
He forgot to say roll tide at the end of it. That was the problem with his data point. There was no roll tide in his
And
conversation.
you had to know you were going to be asked that question too. Like that's what gets me. Like that's what gets me. So
I want to ask you guys quickly, do you believe Alabama or Miami should be in? Body of work, nothing to do with playing Notre Dame, obviously. Try to put Notre Dame in Miami's exact schedule. Does that make so Northern Illinois is not involved. Notre Dame's exact schedule could have been Miami. It's an ACC type schedule. Do you believe Alabama, not who's better? Do you believe Alabama's 3 losses in a better conference, just put it that way, not say superior, gets them in over Miami if you are the person in the room?
I think so. I think you can look at Alabama's schedule and say Alabama has a better win than anything on Miami's schedule.
I thought it was a good point made last night. It was not by the committee, of course, but they said it was Reese Davis again, I believe, the least objectionable of the teams. The least objectionable.
Yeah.
He thinks it's Alabama too, and he actually said there was they had terrible losses. The Oklahoma loss was terrible. Drew, would you say Alabama or Miami if you're trying to break down resumes fairness? And I think you can throw out the SEC is a better conference because you can just look at the teams they played. They played better teams, of course, along the way than Miami.
Yeah, I think I would tend to go to Alabama. I mean, I do think it's a good discussion. I think it was 24-3 loss to Oklahoma, who's not that good that year. Is really hard for me to let go, even if they do have better wins and played an overall tougher schedule. Like the fact that they kind of laid such an egg against a team that they, should have been able to overwhelm, is pretty concerning. And that was, a more recent game. But I think I ultimately would give the edge to Alabama ranked ahead. But I don't really have an issue with either being ranked ahead of the other, I think.
The traditionally, as an older member of the media, it was always the first and foremost, it was wins and losses. Well, that's changed, and I understand. And so when you look at Alabama's body of work, I realize Oklahoma is not a very good football team, but it's still Oklahoma. I mean, it's not, I hate to say it, but it's not Northern Illinois, it's Oklahoma. They just, for whatever reason, they weren't ready to play. And yet another example that it's a Kalen DeBoer coach team and not a Nick Saban team. But I just don't. Miami's resume, not to mention the fact that their defense is just so mediocre to poor.
Yeah.
I can't argue them sliding ahead of Miami.
You know what's funny for me is as soon as Miami lost, I thought to myself, "Oh, they're out." And then I was like, "Oh God, I didn't know a three-loss team was
They
going."
only,
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
no, it didn't have to be Alabama. It could have been Ole Miss or South Carolina, where you're like, "Wow, a three-loss team is ahead of them, though." That's why when JB you said, I don't know why it seems so much worse 16 than 14. I have known it's been going to 14. I know Jack told us, Swerbick told us before he was leaving, it's going to 14, and he believes that helps Notre Dame, which if you think about it, clearly helps Notre Dame because they're be on the outside looking in like Miami is less likely to happen. Why does 16 seem so much worse to me than 14? I can't wrap my head around that. I had not heard 16 from a reliable person such as yourself until
Is it
just now.
still, do you still get the four top teams still get buys in a 16 team format?
I think so, but I'm not sure. Look, I'm saying it's going to at least 14 and
Yes,
16 is
yes.
possible. I'm not sitting here saying 16 is 100% happening, but it's going to at least 14, and there is push out there for it to go to 16, particularly as the SEC and the Big Ten dig in about getting a certain number of guaranteed bids.
Yeah, the
Stupid
ink,
college football, real fast, stupid college football fan question right here. Is it possible to not have conference championship games if you're going to have a 16 team playoff?
Yeah, I think, look, I think, is it 2030? Is it 2032? We're going to be in a 40 to 60 team mega division of college football. And by we, I mean the public writ large. And that's what we're going to deal with. And it'll be far closer to an NFL model where you might play an AFC, NFC type conference championships for a spot in the title game, but it's not going to be a Southeastern Conference championship game as you think of it or as we think of it right now. That's the coaches I talk to, and you'd be surprised the coaches in the ACC that I talk to that don't think they will make the cut for that type of super division. Yes, I said that specifically right there. ACC coaches of programs that have played for the ACC championship within the last decade have told me they don't think they would survive a cut to a 40 to 50 team super division of college football.
Or
so
Clemson?
you're saying that they, John, you're saying that they might, like a UNLV, if they were to win the game this weekend, they would win the conference championship, but wouldn't necessarily assure themselves of a spot in the playoffs.
No, they would be assured of a spot in the playoffs, but it wouldn't necessarily mean they were getting a bye or anything like that. I think
Okay.
you would go far more towards a seeding system at that point in time, a true seeding system rather than a
Well,
conference champion based system.
the ink on the 12 team playoff wasn't even dry
Yeah.
before 14 and 16 were fully in play.
I mean, I think we had a conversation with Jack Swarbrick when the 12 team came out and he said 14's coming. Right? Wasn't I mean
Yeah.
it was probably off air, but he just said 14's coming. It was not even I haven't really prepared myself for that. And now that it's kind of what I believe is a broken situation with the conferences not mattering as much to the conferences, I don't mind 14
We've
either. Plus we're at
really,
12.
yeah, we've really got to reconsider the conference championship games. And we've said before that there's too much money involved, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're going to do this and you're going to keep expanding it, well, how many games you got to have college guys playing 20 games? I mean,
That's
as it is,
and how and you just have no
yeah,
break at all. They're gonna pretend there aren't finals for other teams, and it's just gonna be insane. I mean, that's
I mean, as it is right now, there's, Notre Dame could play 16 games. Others,
Could play
conference teams could
17.
play 17.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
That's
I mean,
that's crazy, man.
that was deemed too many by the NFL when they came out with the 17-week schedule. 17 games. They're like, we can't do that over 19 weeks. This isn't working. I mean, this it is ridiculous. Now, I want to go to Drew real fast on to wrap this part up, but also I want to do some rapid fire predictions. But Drew, your thoughts on the 14? I mean, I know you think it's going to 14, but how would how do you manage what they have here in terms of if it's 16? I don't know how guys get buys. It's just natural. That's a natural bracket. It's a Sweet 16 for crying out loud.
Yeah, I'd have to, I guess, really map out that bracket and,
Yeah,
and do research. I don't know off the top of my head, but I agree. I like the buy format. I think it makes it interesting. I know it kind of confuses some people when they look at their rankings and then they don't see those matchups kind of track. But I think it's worthwhile. I think especially if we're going to increase the number of games you might have to play, that buy seems to matter more, and I think it's a good thing. So I'm not sure on how it's going to work. I know it's going to expand, so I'm not sure that my thoughts really matter. I would like to stick with 12 teams for a little while longer and really get used to this format and see how it works before we immediately go to changing it. We haven't even gotten through a full season to kind of work out the kinks and see how that goes. But yeah, I mean, I guess the more teams in, the more, I like when smaller schools, like I like that we're talking about UNLV and Boise State, and
Mhm.
maybe that gives a better chance for like an Army or a Tulane or Memphis to be in discussion. So if it leads to that, I think that's a positive.
Well, a team like South Carolina, Mississippi too, I guess, certainly would like a 14-team playoff this year. South Carolina's
Yeah,
accomplishments have been pretty impressive.
I kind of feel like if you're letting Alabama in, then this is why 14 would matter because South Carolina's run, I guess recency bias has always played a role with me in the NCAA tournament. It shouldn't in any of these things, but South Carolina, they've had a run. I mean, they've made a name for themselves. Make it. Alabama's stumbled at every month you could stumble.
And it is, I
That's
think
strange.
Alabama beat them by 2 points too. So I know they did beat them. So I
Yeah.
think that they might say that matters. But it is interesting that earlier lost to them in the year that was so close when South Carolina really wasn't playing that as well yet. Um, Counts for so much.
And South Carolina controlled that game actually, and Alabama had to come back in the fourth quarter. And then even with that, South Carolina recovered an onside kick near
Oh, that's
midfield
right.
in the
Yeah.
final minute. And then Lenore Sellers actually might have been hurt that game, and they may have been using the backup quarterback from Auburn, who was not very good. And that game just sort of disintegrated away from South Carolina. South Carolina is a team that had a double-digit lead at home to LSU, and then lost by 3 points, and then led in the fourth quarter at Alabama and lost by 2 points. They've only been outplayed one game, and that was the Ole Miss game at home before they found their footing. Otherwise, South Carolina truly is like 6 points from being an 11-1 football team that would be playing in the SEC championship this weekend and have its spot secured.
We're going to go clockwise on predictions that matter this weekend. So we're going to go Priester, Mentuck, Bryce. Also, any game that truly matters for the playoff. Just the winner, because that's what matters at this point. Clearly doesn't. Or maybe the Oregon game, you can chime in how it's going to go. Boise State, UNLV, Tim Priester.
I think that's the toughest one for me to pick. Not knowing a ton about UNLV other than they have been good the last 2 years. I'm gonna go with the hot team. I know Boise's still in the bye situation. I'm gonna go with UNLV.
I'm gonna go with Boise State. They've been really competitive against some of the best teams. I mean, I know it was earlier, but that 3-point loss at Oregon sticks out to me. And I think they do have, in my opinion, the best or most effective offensive player in the country. I know he hasn't played as well in recent weeks, but I think they've shown a willingness to ride him, even if it might be to his detriment. And I think they're definitely going to do that this weekend.
Okay, I was double checking here because if it was a neutral site game, I was absolutely picking UNLV. Boise State hosts this game
Oh,
inside the big grocery aisle
Priester's taking it back.
known as Albertson Stadium. So I will go with the Broncos at home on what will probably be a cold Friday night in Boise, Idaho.
Priester, gonna switch it real fast, or you gonna ride the
no,
UNLV
I'll
train?
take
Randall
no.
Cunningham's not walking through that door, Priester. There-
I'll stick with my pick.
I'm going Boise State for that reason. I want to point out the great point by Drew about Genty. What if they have to play a couple more games the way they've been riding him? How's he going to feel around January 9th when Boise State's the
He's gonna
87-point underdog to Georgia because he can't walk?
He already is hurt too. He's got an elbow injury,
Yeah, that's
so he's already dinged up.
he's gonna approach Vegas Ferguson's 301 carries in
yes,
1979.
yes, it's not a good idea. All right, Priester, the Fighting Matt Campbell's and Arizona State.
Definitely like Arizona State. I think Iowa State's not that good. I don't think they're that good. I think Arizona State is hot. I like what Coach Dillingham has done with that team, even without Jordan Clark. That'd be an interesting matchup if Jordan Clark had a chance to go against them. But I like Arizona State definitely.
Yeah, I'll go with Arizona State as well. I agree. I like what Kenny Dillingham has done. I mean, referencing Jordan Clark, I think the buy-in he gets from his players, the way he handled Jordan Clark leaving,
Yeah.
I think that probably plays out a lot in this roster, and they're willing to like buy in and turn things around so quickly. So for those who don't know, Jordan Clark, or Kenny Dillingham called Marcus Freeman and endorsed Jordan Clark and how good of a player and person he is while Jordan Clark was visiting Notre Dame to potentially transfer here. So I think that says a lot about the type of person he is in the program he's leading.
Couple of quick Kenny Dillingham notes, and I'm picking the Sun Devils. But as a college football nerd, self-described, I love these two elements. When they clinched a berth in the Big 12 Conference Championship game this week, it triggered a $200,000 bonus clause for Kenny Dillingham. He immediately said, I'm giving that entire $200,000 bonus to my support staff, not to his other coaches, to the support staff in the office. So 20 people in his office are getting between $5,000 and $10,000 bonus checks strictly straight out of Kenny Dillingham's pocket. Here's the other thing: we're in an unprecedented time of access into locker rooms around college football with these team produced videos. And there's a great one that I'm going to be writing about today from Dan Lanning in Oregon. But there's also another one out there showing Kenny Dillingham's halftime speech midway through their evisceration of in-state rival Arizona last week. And in Kenny Dillingham's halftime speech, and I'll edit it here for our young audience, he tells his team, twist the knife, no pity for the MF and Kitty. Let's go.
That's a first. Never heard that one before.
Hey,
That's a
I got
good one.
an odd text here. I don't know how Pete Sampson knows we're talking about Iowa State, but he said he always likes Iowa State in big postseason matchups, so he is picking Iowa State right here. All right, Priester.
Brock
Georgia.
Purdy's not. If Randall Cunningham's not walking through that door, Brock, by God, Purdy is not walking through that door.
I might have lied a little bit on
and
that
it
one.
wouldn't matter.
Priester, Texas and Georgia.
Wow, I think, under normal circumstances, I would just flat out say Georgia, which I probably still am going to stick with. But you want to talk about a long weekend with their 8 overtimes. Like, imagine them trying to bounce back from that. But I just think at the end of the day, as inconsistent as Georgia certainly has been this season, Texas hasn't always been very impressive themselves. I'm going to go with Georgia with the knowledge at the forefront of my mind that they just really had to go to the wall this past weekend.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Texas, and a large part with what you just said. I think Georgia Tech out physicaled them during that game, and they had to, like you said, go, 8 overtimes, really wear themselves out. I think that was their big advantage against Texas the first time. I don't think, especially up front, Texas's offensive line handled that physicality as well as they should, and I don't know that Georgia's going to have that this time around, and I think that's going to really make a difference for Quinn Ewers, who really, I don't feel like I think he got pulled briefly in that game. So I feel like that's going to enable him to play better and Texas gets it done.
If this was a true neutral site game, I would lean a little bit more toward Texas because I think it's tough to beat a team twice, or certainly we always hear about how tough it is to beat a team twice, but it's in Atlanta. Georgia's been there before. Georgia's accustomed to being in the SEC championship game. Texas is playing its first ever full SEC schedule. It will be much closer. I don't expect it to ever be where Georgia's up 23-0 or 30-7 the way it was in Austin, Texas that night. But I still think that Quinn Ewers is just not playing. Both of these quarterbacks are giving the ball up too much, but I think that Kirby Smart, to me, will find a way to make Quinn Ewers give the ball away in this game. I do think it's much closer, and I am curious to see how that impacts Sunday's rankings, because is there a scenario where Texas plays it so closely and loses that Texas is the 6 and Notre Dame ends up the 7 if Penn State or Oregon sticks at the 5? I'm curious to see that. I believe, despite Ward Manual and data points and whatever else, that there is that diabolical possibility in my mind still exists out there.
I like the regulation under, and I think a defensive touchdown will be scored by the speed in that game on both sides. I think that's going to be, was it 2012 when Georgia and Alabama played an absolute brutal slugfest for the right to play Notre Dame, and the wrong team, unfortunately, as we found out later, won? I think it's going to be that type of game. The defenses are going to rule, but of course, the unders and overtimes and defensive touchdowns hurt. All right, there's 2 more good ones, and the first one I think we're going to be unanimous on the winner: Oregon, Penn State.
Yeah, I'm wary of, Penn State's potential for physicality against Oregon. I'm not discounting that, but Oregon's better than Penn State. They're going to win the game.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going with Oregon. I think this line, according to FanDuel right now, is Oregon by 3.5, and I think they cover that as well.
Yeah, I think it's a close game, but I think Oregon covers, and definitely I'm taking Dan Lanning over James Franklin.
Yeah, I think I don't believe the giant blowout will happen. Penn State can play it close to the vest too, but I would definitely take Oregon this one. And the toughest one, and Priester's underdog of the year, but they're going against somebody else now. Still an underdog, Priester barely 1 point underdog to Clemson. Clemson and
Yeah.
SMU, the interlopers. It's kind of like when Notre Dame drove down to Greensboro and Mike Bray left on his, what was it, his, which type of Buick did he have? Oh, his not an Elantra. What was his car that he was going to staple the ACC championship trophy in the front of?
I don't remember
Eagle,
now.
One of
Buick Regal or something.
It was a fantastic line. I'll think about the Buick he had at the time, but that's the best. This is the interlopers from SMU.
Yeah, you know which way I would have gone had they been matching up against Miami. This makes it a lot different because Clemson's been I realize having, lost 3 games, but when they've been good, they've been really, really good. But I've got to stick with my Mustangs pick.
Yeah, I'm going with SMU. I think I was looking it up. They have, if you look at yards per carry allowed, SMU's third nationally with allowing 2.8 yards per carry. Clemson doesn't run the ball a ton. I think they're like kind of mid-tier in terms of how often they run, but they've been really effective. If you look at yards per carry, I think there's 15th, and I think SMU can take that away and make it one-dimensional. And I think that is ultimately the difference.
Yeah, I'm going SMU. Kevin Jennings has been splendid since Rhett Lashley early in the season inserted him into the starting lineup at the quarterback position. I like his dual threat dynamics to be able to give Clemson problems. Among their common foes is Louisville, which went to Clemson and really handled the Tigers. SMU had to go to Louisville the week after Louisville had played at Notre Dame, and SMU led that game really wire to wire. My favorite thing about all of this is that SMU AD Rick Hart is on Twitter fighting with Iowa State AD Jamie Pollard about which one of those two teams has the better resume. And so you talk about the splendid nature of a 12-team playoff for media and fans. Let's not forget the ADs. And one final note, Rick Hart's out here stumping for SMU. Respect that. He's a finalist for the South Carolina AD job as well.
It was a Buick Enclave, and I think Lashley should rent one and drive out of there with that thing stapled to his front. This has been our final edition of College Football Playoff Irish Illustrated Insider. We'll need a better name for it next year, I think. That's a mouthful. But it's been fun, and I agree with you guys that whether fair or not, it sure is good for the viewing portion of the sport because November's rankings make it a lot of fun going into it. And Notre Dame is in. That's what matters. Enjoy the games this weekend. For Tim Priester, Drew Mentok, and John Bryce, I'm Tim O'Malley. Thanks for joining us on Irish Illustrated Insider.